Hi, welcome back to the Affinitive Design Podcast. This is episode 9, and I'm your host, David Clayton. And today I come back after spending a week in the mountains camping with my son, and it was a fantastic time. There's nothing like going up into the mountains, into the wilderness, and just enjoying the great outdoors. One of the things I love about experiencing the great outdoors is what I noticed when I was returning back to the Salt Lake Valley, and that is how nasty and polluted it is in the city. Driving back down into the valley, you could just see the smoke and the smog. It was terrible. I wish I could go back to the woods because it was just clean air. It just made me happy. So why do I bring that up? Because I think it's really important for us to realize that the environment, dealing with pollution, that's not a conservative issue, that's not a liberal issue, it's not right wing or left wing, it's an everybody issue. I mean, there are people who are choking, living here in the valley. It's so bad. The pollution is just horrible. And is it anybody's fault necessarily? I don't know. I don't really want to get into the politics of it because that to me is less important than the fact that it's a very real thing. Let's face it, Salt Lake City and the valley that it resides in is in what we call the Great Basin. Why is it called the Great Basin? Well, basically, 10,000 years ago, there was a big, huge lake here, and that lake was called Lake Bonneville. It's about 800 feet deep. It was huge. It encompassed probably about half the state of Utah, parts and a little bits of Nevada and Idaho. It was humongous. And so about 10,000 years ago, the ice dam at the northern end in Idaho, where that Lake Bonneville was held back, that ice dam broke. And as the water flooded out, it revealed the Great Basin, which was basically this big dish that held all the water. So now that that ice dam's gone, most of that water's gone, what remains are the salt flats and the Great Salt Lake. Well, okay, that's all fine and good, but what is it? Why is it important that I mention that it's a bowl, that the Great Basin is a bowl? Well, the problem with it being a bowl is that means all the air just gets trapped inside. Well, that's no fun because when the air gets trapped inside, that means the pollution just builds up and builds up and builds up. So, what does that have to do with architecture? What does that have to do with affinitive design? Okay, so let's go back to the fact that I was just up in the mountains and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. Specifically, I was at Flaming Gorge in the Uinta Mountains. Just a gorgeous place to be. The air was clean. The skies were blue. It was just fantastic. That's what I want down in the valley. Now, the reason why it's hard to have that in the valley is because of that basin effect. All that pollution, all the particulates, it just gets trapped in there. And until we get a storm coming through, and this doesn't matter if it's summer or winter, if the air's gotten trapped by the mountains inside the basin, then the pollution just stays. So what I want to see, though, is reducing the amount of particulates, reducing the amount of pollution that gets up into the atmosphere. And the reason why is because the less pollution we have, at least we have a fighting chance of having clean air. Now, a lot of people, especially on the conservative side, they'll argue that, you know what, it doesn't matter because it's all nature, it's created by nature. Because if you look at the winter time during the inversion, during the months of December and January, which is something that happens every year here in the Salt Lake Valley, we get these really intense inversions where the warm air is at the top in the mountains and the cold air gets trapped down in the Great Basin. Well, the problem with that is, again, it intensifies the amount of pollution that gets trapped. So you have to have a storm to come and clear it out. And usually there's about a month in December and January where there's not a whole lot of storms. And then sometime usually late January, early February, we start seeing the spring storms starting to pop up, and we start getting snowstorm after snowstorm after snowstorm. And that's, by the way, the best time to go skiing here. So, but with regards to the air pollution, it gets really bad during January. It's absolutely the worst time of the year to be here in the Salt Lake Valley, unless you're just going up to the mountains. So let's go back to what can we do about it. Okay, so with buildings, some people probably think, hey, I'm not contributing to pollution. My building, it's just a building, right? Here's where you're wrong. So each of our buildings, if you are using electric power generated by the power companies, then these power companies, they're typically, especially here in Utah, they're using coal. And the reason why they're using coal most often is because coal is cheap. Well, the problem with coal is it's just adding so many particulates, so much pollution up into the air that it really chokes us. The other problem is the driving. So how can we solve that in an architectural sense? Well, the first thing we can do is we can design the building to be energy efficient. So if we can use the smallest amount of electricity possible, then we're reducing the amount of pollution that's going up into the air. So again, like I said, this is not a left-wing issue, this is not a right-wing issue. This is actually just a science issue. I mean, it's really simple. If we reduce the amount of electricity we use, then we reduce the amount of pollution that we put up into the air. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, what about solar? Yes, that's a great idea. Here's the challenge, though. If you're getting solar and you're still connecting it with the grid and you don't have batteries, then what happens is when the electric power company sees that there's too much power being generated by all the solar panels, then what they do is they just turn off the solar panels, and you end up having the coal-fired power anyways. Why? Because the electric companies, they can't just shut down the coal-fired power plants. They have to keep those running because that creates what's called baseline power. So this baseline power, it needs to run continuously. It's really hard to ramp it up and ramp it down, so that's why they'll turn off your solar panels. So the best thing you can do if you're going to get solar panels is get the batteries too. So you can definitely call me if you want to find out more. I know some great people who know how to do this. Especially one of my good friends at Beautify Solar, Isaac Hunsaker. He does a fantastic job, and he'll install solar panels and the batteries. But that's the important part, is making sure that you have the batteries, because what the batteries do is that allows the solar panels to charge the batteries during the times when most energy is being produced by solar. Then the batteries will feed it back. What it does is it helps even out the fluctuations in the electric grid, and it also helps you, the homeowner, actually maximize the return on investment, because then you're using a lot more of your solar power and a lot less of Rocky Mountain Power's coal-fired plants, which are really dirty and stinky and pollute the air and make me sad. So let's not pollute any more than we have to. So Tesla Solar, that's one company that I'm really fascinated by too, because they're really pushing the power walls, the battery systems, but they're also tying it in with the vehicles. So here's the interesting thing for me as an architect. I'm looking at the fact that we have solar panels and batteries now as a great option to resolve a lot of the problems with overpriced energy and also too much pollution, but it also, if you're in California, for example, it's now actually building code. You actually have to have an electric vehicle charging port in your battery, in your garage, if it's a new home. Now this is fantastic, because if you already have the solar and you already have the battery, then guess what? Now You're also reducing how much gasoline you have to purchase, which saves you money, but then you're also not polluting with your car. See where I'm going? This is great. So, what I love about the solar industry and the battery industry and the electric vehicle industry, what they're trying to do, they're basically using capitalism to solve the environmental problems. So, this is something that everybody on the left and right should be cheering. I mean, after all, if you're on the left, your big issue is the environment, right? Okay, so you should be cheering Tesla on. You should be cheering other solar companies on. You should be cheering other electric vehicles. Why? Because this is capitalism solving the problem that you thought you were going to have some kind of tyrannical government control everybody and prevent them from being able to, have a profit so that we reduce the amount of pollution. Instead, the free market solving the problem. And for conservatives, for right-wingers, hey, this is great. You're getting self-reliance, you're getting freedom from the electric company, and you're also cleaning the environment through capitalism, through the free market. So this is a win-win on both sides, I think. And I don't normally like to get political on this podcast, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, like I said, last week when I was coming back down into the valley from the mountains, and I could see the pollution so clearly, and I could smell it even from inside the car with the windows shut and the air conditioning on, the filters there, I could still smell it as soon as we entered the valley, and I was horrified. This is something that we need to fix. We need to stop polluting our atmosphere so much. So again, let's talk about some of the things that we can do. At least on the architecture side, go solar, get energy efficient design. Make sure you're not buying more house than you actually need. One of the advantages of an architect, though, is you can have your architect design exactly what you need. So you're not buying a house that's too big just because, oh, well, I needed 4 bedrooms, and the only way I could get 4 bedrooms through the home builder was to buy this plan that had the 4 bedrooms, but it also had this humongous basement, it also had this 3-car garage, it also had all these other things. Well, if you need a 4-bedroom house and you need, certain parameters being met, why not just go ahead and build it custom? Why not have an architect design it so that you can have little nooks and crannies that we can add some additional storage, like for example underneath the stairs, that's usually not provided for by a home builder. Well, we can design you in cabinetry that will handle that. We can design special spaces. We can just design loft spaces. We can do all kinds of really cool things that make a house have a lot more character, be a lot more beautiful, a lot more whimsical and fun, but it also solves the issues of having too much house. Because the less house we can fit you into, then you're saving money first. Second, that means it's less to heat and cool the house, which means less pollution into the atmosphere. See where I'm going here? So, back to what else you can do for your home. Getting good insulation. I think we've talked about insulation on a previous episode. Critically important. And then some other things that we can do is, consider about, okay, how much do you actually need in terms of electronics? How much do you actually need for all this other stuff? And, what are you willing to offset with solar? So these are things that, as an architect, I can help you deal with these issues. Other architects are qualified too, so just make sure you're asking them these questions. What are their values? What are they after? At least in the eyes of Affinitive design philosophy, you should be looking at things that help you be in harmony with nature, with family, and with yourself. And so these are your 3 most important things that help you have a happy and well-functioning, meaningful life. And so Affinitive design is not about trying to force everybody into one way of being. But with the environment, with nature, this is something that you're going to want to do anyways. So anyways, long story short, I just really wanted to emphasize how important it is for each one of us to do what we can to reduce the amount of pollution. But the best way we can do that is by improving our homes, improving our buildings, and also, even though I can't help you with the cars, but, also consider EVs, consider hybrids, consider fuel efficient gas vehicles as opposed to the really big gas guzzlers. If you really need an F-350, great, wonderful, proud of you. But just consider the fact that, if you don't really need to be driving that around, if you have that just for show, why are you polluting my air? And especially if you're one of these guys out there that, takes off the catalytic converter just so that you can blow out black smoke because you want to show off to everybody. Oh yeah, see? I'm thumbing my nose at all those who want a clean environment. And I'm thinking, okay, I still want to breathe clean air. I don't care if you think it's cool that you've got black smoke coming out of your tailpipe. That's not cool. What's cool is if you can be respectful of other people, if you can not pollute my air. And so, again, I'm by no means a left-winger. I'm not anywhere on the political spectrum right now with regards to this discussion. This is just health and safety and welfare of our lives. I mean, this is for each one of us to be happy. And so, I know I went on a little bit of a rant today, but for me, it's becoming more and more important every day that I breathe this bad air here in the valley. And so I want everybody to think about that and really consider it and do what you can to clean up the air. I mean, just everyone, just do what you can to clean up the air. And it will make all of us, and especially your children, healthier and happier. And with that, I leave you for another week. I look forward to meeting with you next week on our next episode of this podcast. Again, this is the Affinitive Design Podcast. I'm David Clayton, your host. And with that, I bid you adieu.